Hi folks, this is Dr. Rob CYWES. I'm the Carb Addiction Doc. And today we're going to do something a little quirky. I recently gave a talk, and at the end of the talk, of course, I speak a lot, so I went a little bit long. And instead of having a question answer session, the moderator said, why don't you guys just send in some questions? And I promised that I would do a video to answer some of the questions. So these are just random questions. I pulled out about 10 or 11 of them randomly out of the bucket. There were hundreds of questions. And today I'm just going to go ahead and give you my opinion, my thoughts, our practice principles on some of the questions. I'll read the question and then give you a brief answer. And these are just random questions. They cover the entire spectrum of carb addiction, carbohydrates, ketogenic eating. So the first question is, what are the traps new keto eaters need to be aware of? What are common problems or pitfalls to eating plan if not losing weight? Well, if you're not losing weight, I've got a video on this channel that discusses binge eating disorder and snacking. And I would urge you to watch those two videos to cover the if you're not losing weight. But the early pitfalls, I think the greatest challenge, and there's this conflict of how do I get into fat-adapted ketosis, but how do I utilize that to eat less? So one of the biggest problems I have in the ketogenic space is that, oh, you got to eat this, you got to eat this. They create scarcity. They create the scarcity and everybody's, oh, I must eat this. I have to eat a stick of butter. I have to add butter to my food. I have to eat this fat. No, you don't. No, you don't. If obesity is your primary driving force, yes, you want to get into fat-adapted ketosis, but the best fat to use is your own. You want to give your body an opportunity to get to that fat. So the first thing to understand is this is not a diet. It's not, here's your sheet of paper, off you go, start tomorrow and do it all. This is about behavioral change. You want to challenge yourself by recognizing a particular harmful behavior that has benefit from an emotional perspective, but liability from a health perspective, and address that one behavior. It may start with changing what you're drinking, getting rid of calories in your drinks and bring in something that doesn't contain calories. I've got some green tea right here. That used to be a Coke and M&Ms when I was fat. So there are transformations you can make slowly, progressively. But look at the structure of how you're eating and why you're eating in a certain way as much as what you're eating. So some of the traps are that we fall into a diet, and most of us, let's face it, are experts at failing weight loss programs. And a ketogenic diet is no different. Yes, at first you'll have some success changing what you're eating, even if you're eating a lot of food. If you get rid of the carbohydrates, you're going to slowly, progressively get into ketosis. And that's what we're looking for. But then work on eating as little as you need to eat rather than as much as you desire to eat. And I've seen so many people lose a chunk of weight and grant themselves permission to eat massive amounts of food, all because it doesn't contain carbohydrates. That's not the way the human body works. The human body is incredibly self-sufficient. So it is continuously undergoing, it's like a very busy construction site, continuously going repair and transformation, and it's breaking certain things down, certain cells down, and replenishing and growing new cells. But it doesn't just discard the breakdown products. It reutilizes them, breaks them down into individual fatty acids, into cholesterol, into amino acids, and then reuses those. Some of them get converted to energy. Some of them could get converted to nutrient blocks. All you're doing when you're eating is eating a tiny fraction of the absolute amount that you lost. So the most important pitfall to begin with is don't be a victim of scarcity. The healthiest meal you can eat at any one time, if you're overweight, is nothing. Dining in, eating what's inside of you. So early on, the biggest trap is people telling you what you must do. The only thing you must do is progressively get to a point where you're getting rid of carbohydrates and you're getting to a point where you're eating 2 or 3 meals a day. Other than that, there's no have-tos, there's no must-dos. Whether you're more plant-based or carnivore-based, neither is better. It depends on you. So be aware of treating this as a diet. It isn't. It's a change in the way of life. Don't fat load. Make sure there's fat in your food, but you don't have to eat enormous amounts of fat. You don't have to pour MCT oil or fat in your coffee. Beware of snacking. A snack is always an emotional event. And be aware of lookalikes. Don't do lookalikes. Don't do keto brownies or keto ice cream or keto lasagna. Because what you're eating is ice cream and brownies and lasagna, and you are triggering your thoughts of those foods, and those are the foods, your relationship with those things. They're actually drugs, not foods, that made you fat in the first place. Break those traditions. Eat your vegetables, eat your animal products, but call them by what they are, not by some transformation. Next question. How many macros should I eat? And everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an idea. No, nobody knows. And each of us is different. And every diet is based on some form of macro formula. You must eat this, you must eat. No, you don't. First principle, healthiest meal you can eat is nothing. If you're trying to lose weight. Once you look like the Olsen twins, we'll change that narrative. But until that time, the healthiest meal you can eat is nothing. On a ketogenic way of life, you don't want to count the carbohydrates in anything. You don't want to count the macros, how much protein, how much fat. What you do want to do early on is know exactly what the carbohydrate content of food is. Okay? So you want to know how much carbohydrates are there in an apple, how much carbohydrates are there in this pretzel, how much You want to educate yourself as to where the carbohydrates are hidden. But once you know, addiction management is binary. It's yes or no. No alcoholic needs to know how much alcohol there is in a drink. All they need to know is yes or no. And it's a binary choice. Same thing here. If there are carbohydrates in food, you stay away from them. If they are not, they're fine to eat. With one caveat. All vegetables by definition are carbohydrates. But vegetables are free. And the reason for that is your obesity didn't come from carbohydrates. Your obesity came from your use of carbohydrates as a drug for emotion management. It's your relationship with them that was the problem. And I've never ever met a fat person who had a rough day and rushed home and pigged out on Brussels sprouts. So while all vegetables by definition are carbohydrate, they're fine to eat with 3 absolute hard no's. No rices of any kind, no grains of any kind, and no potatoes of any kind. But the rest are fine to eat. And if that becomes a way of life, you're going to do just fine. If you want to be pure carnivore, absolutely fine. If you want to be mostly vegetarian, absolutely fine. But don't count your macros. Counting is a countdown to failure. I'm going to keep... If you cling onto your counting, you're clinging onto failure. Remember this. A simple little mathematical formula. Take your current age and subtract it from 100. That's how long this journey lasts for. It should last until about 10 minutes after you're dead. Very, very difficult to count macros for the rest of your life. Fine to start there, to know, to educate yourself. I don't know what the carbohydrate content of certain foods are, but I absolutely know yes or no. That's what you want to get to. Next question, net carbs. Net carbs is not something I have heard from you or you have used in your videos. Why not? Very simple answer, and it's science. Net carbs are a word created by manufacturers to sell shit to you in the guise of being healthy. The human body does not do mathematics. The only thing that matters, and I think there's consensus amongst the providers in the space, the only thing that matters is total carbohydrates. Do not be fooled by the use of net carbohydrates. There may be carbohydrate reduction, like any diet. You may do okay with that for a little while, but it's unsustainable. And net carbohydrates are a way to grant you permission to eat crap that's going to cause a relapse. Never use the word net carbs. And if anybody has net carbs written boldly on the front of their advertising food product, stay the hell away from it. Only total carbs matter, because that's what your body sees. Next question. Is there a quick way to get into ketosis? Yes, there is. Yes, there is, but it's not necessary. So if everyone, I've got to stick my finger, I've got to use my keto. I love Keto Mojo, by the way, but my Keto Mojo, how many ketones should I have? I want to be 0.5, I want to be 1, but I'm only 0.5. Irrelevant. If you're not eating carbohydrates, your body will eventually get into ketosis as a transformation, but you've got to resolve insulin resistance, and that's a different journey for each of us. There is no quick way to get into ketosis. There's no pill, there's no formula that gets you instantly fat adapted, which is really what we're talking about. You can get into ketosis by drinking a bottle of olive oil, by eating a stick of butter, by fasting. But it doesn't make you fat adapted. Fat adapted is a hormonal change. It is not a substrate issue. You don't become fat adapted by eating fat. You become fat adapted by reducing your insulin resistance and by cycling your hormonal pattern each day. And by utilizing fat between meals as a dominant product. This fat, the fat you're trying to lose. So yes, by all means, early on, add a little bit of fat to your food. I have no problem with MCT oil or butter or coconut oil in your coffee. That bullet coffee for a little while early on to help you to get over the carbohydrate withdrawal, but that's a physiologic withdrawal. Then get rid of using excess fat as a calorie source. You can use this product, Ketone IQ, or any exogenous ketones, and get into ketosis very quickly. My ketones will go up to 4 or 5 after I swallow a bottle of that. Do I use it? Of course I do. But I don't use it to get me into ketosis. I use it to help me not to eat dinner on a day when I'm trying to go 36 hours or 48 hours without eating, and I'm struggling. I use it when I'm about to go for a long run and I want to run on fat and ketosis. I use exogenous ketones if I've screwed up and I want to get back on track. So absolutely, a bottle of that works really, really well. And I'm a huge supporter of Ketone IQ. We've tested about 30 different ketones, SHERYL, my dietitian, myself. That's the best one that we use. And the fastest way to get into ketosis is with an exogenous ketone. Works every time. But don't use it for that purpose. Use it to suppress appetite. Use it to give you the energy to be able to focus intensely when you're doing some work or when you're exhausted. Use it in a goal-directed way. But there is no quick way to fat adapt because that's a hormonal change. And I will tell you this, on average with my patients, and you're not going to like what I'm about to say, it takes about 2 years to fully fat adapt. But the buy-in is a lifestyle. The buy-in is a lifelong pattern of change. But about 2 years to fat adapt properly. You can get there by the measurables, but from a hormonal perspective, for your body to prefer fat as a fuel source takes, on average, 2 years. To get your indices down, to get to that point where your body preferentially prefers fat. So this is a lifestyle. It is not a diet. You can crash into it. But the sustainability comes from a behavioral change that is slow and steady over time. Dr. CYWES, where's the CGM? What is recommended for patients? Glucose, ketone meter, when to check before or after meals, both. What should our ketone numbers be and our glucose levels? The main reason, if you're not diabetic, if you're just an obese person, the main reason to check your blood sugars and your ketones is accountability and biofeedback. I love wearing my CGM. I don't have one on right now. I'll be putting it on later tonight. But I love wearing my CGM as a biofeedback, as kind of a little praiseworthy thing. Like I can say, hey, look at my numbers. They're good. But it's kind of irrelevant. My ketone meter doesn't tell me what I've just eaten. Well, it kind of does. If I've eaten crap, it goes up. But it doesn't tell me what to eat. I use it as a biofeedback tool. I use it as a way to monitor myself and to keep me focused, because if you don't know, you're choosing not to know. Keto Mojo is an excellent device. Requires a finger stick, but it'll give you your ketones and your blood sugars. And you want to be somewhere around 0.5 to 2 on ketones. Even if you're at 0.3, I'm okay with that. You just want to register positive. Oh, you're going to be more of that. No, you don't. It's a shift over time. You want to monitor your blood sugars, but they shift over time as well. So being obsessed with them, I must be this, and then beating yourself up and berating yourself, that's the wrong thing to do. Don't do that. Don't live by the numbers. Live by your lifestyle. Look at how often you're eating. Look at what you're snacking on, and look at what you're eating. Not just what, but also how much and why. And the numbers will fall out where they are. If the numbers are very off, we can talk about that clinically, but don't obsess over the numbers. So CGMs are nice as biofeedback tools when you're trying to lose weight. They're wonderful. There are times when you eat something where, man, my sugars went up, or times you go for a run or you fasted and your sugars go up because you're stressed. It's useful to know. But for weight loss, not that important. Keto Mojo, great to know, but not that important. So it's a matter of pride. It's a matter of biofeedback, behavioral feedback. Very, very useful. If you can get hold of it cheaply, great. But I wouldn't spend a lot of money out of pocket to monitor the numbers. Because eventually you'll know. But if you talk with us, we can check the blood work and actually see where you are on this journey and track the blood work, which is far more important than the day-to-day. Next question, fasting and exercise, keto and exercise. Concerns, right way, wrong way. I've got a whole talk coming up on exercise, on physical activity. And I'm going to defer this question to that video, but it's going to be a very, very important video that is going to slap you upside the head. You're going to have those aha moments with it. And it'll actually be a 2-part video, 2-stage video on specifically on physical activity and exercise. I just gave this lecture in a couple of different places, and it'll astound you what my truth is. And you'll argue with it. You're going to shout against it. You're going to rail against it. But if I make you think, so hold that question. We'll answer that in a little bit. In videos, next question. In videos, mentions of fat fortifying and fat signals. What are fat signals? Clarify, please. If you've overeaten fat, you're going to feel queasy. You're going to feel a bit sick to your stomach. You're going to feel queasy. And everybody that's taking these GLP-1 agonists, that's what they feel. But the goal here is to eat a small amount of fat, to eat slowly, and to eat sequentially. And there are hormones, 4 hormones from the gut, GLP-1, peptide YY, GIP, somatostatin, and one from the fat cells, leptin, that go back to your brain and say, hey, dude, you've had enough. Those are hormonal feedback hormones that give you a sense of satiety, and satiety is primarily triggered by fat. So one of the ways that I will utilize that is if I don't want to eat, I may use some ketone IQ to get me into ketosis. I may use some coffee. This one is black, but it sometimes has a bit of heavy cream in it. Or some MCT oil. And that keeps me in ketosis and suppresses my appetite because my body has fat to live on. So the goal here is not to get a signal of, oh my God, I feel terrible. That means you've overdone it. The goal here is to not feel hungry. And physiologic hunger, not emotional hunger. And if you can get to a point where you're using a bridge drink with a little bit of fat in it, a bit of MCT oil, a bit of heavy cream, some ketones, some heavy cream, that's not a bad way to go to skip meals. So on a day when I'm eating once a day or not eating, I will add a little bit of fat to my food if I want to. Not to my food, to my drink. Now the purists will say, black coffee. Yeah, black coffee, if I'm trying to intentionally lose weight, which is different. If I'm intentionally trying to lose weight, I'm going to go black with my coffee and use my own fat to provide those ketones. If I'm trying to just go a long period of time without eating, I may add a little bit of fat to my food. So the intent is different. It's not that I'm ambiguous in my answers. You've got to know when you're going to add fat to your drinks and when you're not, and what the purpose is. If you're obsessed with weight loss, don't be eating exogenous fats. If you're trying to stay in ketosis, you're trying to stay in a fat-adapted state, you're trying not to eat for a long period of time through the day, your little mind-cleansing moment, your little bridge drink can contain a little bit of fat. The purpose there is to not eat. So each of those is a slightly different indication. It's not as simple as, oh, you must do this or you must do that. Understand when and what you're doing it. But fat fortifying early on gets you into that ketosis, blocks fat. That's why we add a lot of fat to our food early on in a ketogenic diet. You may have the keto flu a little bit, you may feel like crap, but it helps you to get over that transformation from your body primarily using sugar to more likely to use fat. But eventually, you don't have to do that. The fat I eat in my food is the fat that comes with my food. We don't artificially add fat. If the food's very lean, we may add a little bit of cheese or some butter to it. But if I'm eating a ribeye steak, I don't add fat to it. If I'm eating an egg, I don't add a lot of fat to it. So it really is more subtle than you must do this or you must do that. Early on, the rookies, absolutely fine. Can of sardines is a great way to get into fat ketosis if you like them. So don't overthink this one. Don't make it an absolute rule. Have different indications for living your life in different ways. And in our practice, that's what we help you to do. It's more sophisticated, but it's a way of life. If going to drink a beer, eat ice cream, chips, what is the best plan of attack so you don't lose being in ketosis? And how quickly can you get back into ketosis? Look, folks, we all screw up, but it's called a relapse. It's always a relapse. Whether you eat one M&M or a whole tub of ice cream, it's a relapse. It was intentional, and you granted yourself permission to do something that there's never, ever, ever a valid reason to do. Okay? One sip of beer doesn't make the alcoholic drunk. But when they grant themselves permission to have that first sip of beer, they've crossed that threshold. And it takes a long time to get back. Oh no, I was able to do it. I can, on my birthday. Folks, if you have a carbohydrate addiction, addiction is addiction. Nobody just uses a little bit of heroin on Tuesdays. That heavy smoker can't just go and have one cigarette a day because they're back smoking, they're back drinking, they're back using heroin. There is no Narcan. There is no Narcan for a carbohydrate overdose. Please, folks, be empowered by the fact that that's disgusting and I'm not going to do it. When you do make a mistake, own it. You can't pay it back. But analyze why it happened and create a game plan for correcting this going forward. It's called a CAPA, a corrective action plan. You can't undo the mistake. You can't pay it back. You can't punish yourself out of it. But you can sure as hell make sure that you're not going to repeat the same mistake under the same conditions again. And sometimes it requires a quirky way of changing a behavior. I don't carry money on me so that I can't buy the M&M McFlurry on the way home. Because that was a problem for me 17, 18 years ago. But if you ask a vegan to eat a steak, they're not going to apologize because they don't feel deprived of steak. They're arrogant about it. How the hell can you kill Bambi, you bastard? And as you become arrogant about not eating carbohydrates, then there are fewer and fewer events that are going to trigger you. And you're not going to let your guard down. But that is an evolution. That arrogance is an evolution. It takes time and distance away from carbohydrates to develop that arrogance that's disgusting. How can anyone do it? My wife and I just had a recent little conflict over this. We don't eat carbohydrates in the house. My son is a 95% carnivore. His third birthday last week. And he had his birthday party a couple of days ago, and she wanted to get him a cake. And I was vehemently opposed to it. Not because it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just not something we do. She didn't buy him a pack of cigarettes. She didn't do all those things for him. But she was adamant that she's going to buy him a cake. And the cool thing is, I stood back because it's my wife and I value my relationship more than anything else. Got him a cake, put a slice in front of him. All the other kids picked out on their cake. He put his finger in the icing, put it in his mouth, made a funny face, and that was it. Game over. Game over. But we shouldn't, in my opinion, still have offered that to him. Now, he's going to encounter it elsewhere. He's probably going to have some from time to time. Because every subliminal message, Coco Melon is all about carbohydrates. In fact, they're vegetarian focused, and he loves his Coco Melon. So we're fighting society. We're fighting all the environment around him. But if we've raised him right, if we've raised him away from that, hopefully he's not going to be a victim of our carbohydrate-based establishment. But there is no Narcan for a carbohydrate relapse. Try not to do it, but if you do it, OAC, ownership, I made a mistake, and there's never a valid reason to eat a carbohydrate, analysis of why it happened, and come up with a corrective action plan when you're in the same situation again. Here's how I'm going to do it differently. OAC. Gut health. Gut health. I'm going to do a whole segment, a whole video on gut health and the human biome. And there's a lot of misconceptions right there. We're going to go through that, so I'm going to hold off on that one. All right, folks. There's a lot more over here. I'll probably do another video to answer the rest of these questions. But I know these are just random thoughts, random questions. I hope that helps. And I'm actually going to do a few videos specifically on each of these topics because it's much broader than I've talked about right now. If that's made you think, if it's made you consider a transformation away from a ketogenic diet to a ketogenic lifestyle where you're addressing why you're eating a certain way rather than just what you're eating, I've done my job. Don't overthink this. Understand certain indications for certain times in your life when you do certain things, and understand that there are multiple tools that you can use in your toolkit, and they just become routine for you. I am the Carb Addiction Doc. If you want an appointment with us to talk about all of these things, to help you on your journey, to help you on that transformation, especially to help this to become more sophisticated, give us a shout, 561-517-0642. And if you like what we're talking about, throw us $1 or leave a comment. Hate what I said. If you disagree with it vehemently, leave a comment. I'd love to discuss that with you, and I'll try to do that. Till next time.